recording now.
Oh,
right? So
yes.
as from
now
now,
I can see the recording button.
Yeah, now I'm recording. You see, I try not to record absolutely everything because it becomes too large.
Yeah.
Yes.
Welcome, Martin. Nice to have you in. We have Professor Mark Levine with us, but I will introduce him later on when we have more people in here.
Okay.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Martin
Actually,
is Argentinian and Noko is
10
Japanese.
o'clock where I am. It's 10 p.m. in Beijing.
Yeah, I think that, we not only we must thank all speakers, but particularly you for working so late for our students, Mark.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Julian is in. Julian is now joining us. Welcome, Julian.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to have you here.
Good morning.
Good morning. Not quite.
Or
It's
good
almost
afternoon to you.
Yeah.
No, it's good night for Mark. It's about 10 p.m.
Where are you?
Okay.
Are you in the university facilities or in your own dorms, Mark?
I'm in my apartment, which is owned by the university. It's about 10 meters across the street from the outside of
Good.
my campus.
Good. Here we have Jana. Welcome, Jana. You seem to have disappeared. Let me see if I can find you there. Yes, Jana is there. Sarah Louise is here as well.
Great.
These students are very orderly. They arrive on time.
That's very good.
Well, yeah.
I guess you can say we're not from the Brazilian culture.
No, you're not. Definitely not.
But you know what though? This is a very common kind of conception. I had a friend, I've had a number of South African friends, and they would always refer to it as South African time. And my family was Jewish, and commonly we would refer to that as being Jewish Standard Time, which would be some period of time, 10 to 15 minutes late. So I think many people have a personal perception that they are not on time.
Yeah, well, that's it. Well, Brazilians certainly are not on time, and if you turn up on time, it will be a bit of an insult. You will find them wrong-footed. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you. Welcome.
You know what? That's Alfredo. That's similar in China. If you eat if someone invites you to their home and you eat, and you don't eat everything, then this assumption is that you didn't like the food. On the other hand, if they take you to a restaurant and you eat everything, then they
ask for more.
They didn't order enough. Okay, so you have these different reactions depending upon the context of where you.
Well, let me see. It's time to start now. So let me introduce our guest speaker today, who is an eminent professor, American, and living in Beijing, where he has been living for over a decade and a half. But not only living, he's a teacher there. He teaches at the National University of Nationalities. I think that would be the most appropriate translation for it. Yeah. And one thing that he has achieved, like far beyond the duty of a professor, is to become the ambassador, a cultural ambassador to China, to the extent that the Chinese premier, the prime minister, showed the Chinese appreciation for his work and awarded him a prize that is very seldomly awarded to foreigners. Certainly, I believe never before, to somebody that was not a member of government. So here we are with Mark Levine, a professor from California that became Chinese by adoption, where he lives and teaches, and he has become particularly focused on communicating through music. So one of the most beautiful opportunities that we have today is to have his experience and his generosity working at 10 p.m. at night from Beijing is to offer us the chance of being a cultural interpreter, offering a cultural bridge for us in the point of view, not exclusively of an American, but of a broad-minded American that has friends from all over the parts of the world, and they know how hard it is to fit into a very different culture. So without more, I will leave you with Professor Mark Levine. Please remember, we have 30 minutes of Mark, followed by some 10 minutes of questions that you all very bright students will concoct while he's speaking, and make sure that when you ask your questions, they will be phrased concisely enough for everybody to understand. Thank you very much, Mark. Go ahead.
Good, very good. I have a number of points that I'd like to talk about. I have a very simple PPT, but I'm not going to bother with it because I'd rather look at people when I'm talking. One of the things that I teach here is English public speaking and debating. So I think the ability to be able to see who you're speaking to is a very useful and preferable. Okay, as was mentioned, so I've lived in Beijing, in China for 15 years. I teach at a university called the Minzu University of China. 70% of our students are Chinese ethnic minorities. And we have many of our faculty and staff are also among the ethnic minorities in China, which I won't really discuss. But I'm not in the business world, but I have experience, I'm a sociologist. So in the course of my teaching and singing and traveling around China, I've observed quite a bit, and I'd like to share some of those things. One of the things, and I'll do it through some stories of the experience that I have a friend, which is how I was introduced to Alfredo, who is also, she works as my agent for my musical work. And I have many other friends who are in the entertainment field who speak Chinese. I don't speak Chinese, but one of the things that I learned both through those other friends and through my friends is that the ability to be able to speak language while it's desirable, Chinese, while it's desirable and might be considered important, frankly, it's actually not enough. And what's even more critical in doing any kind of business or similar types of work is an understanding of a cultural literacy. Let me tell you a specific story about this. I was invited many years ago to sing at an event. It was an award ceremony for developers of large homes. And I was seated at the main table with the key people who were receiving awards for their work. And a man was sitting next to me, and he was the #1 recipient of many awards. And he didn't speak Chinese. He didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Chinese. But some months later, he contacted my friend who was working as my agent. And he said he was going to be building 500 new homes and building a golf course and building a hotel that was going to be managed by Sheraton Hotels. And he said he wanted me to come and sing at the press conference. So he also said, please ask Mark to give me a good price. So I discussed this with my friend afterwards. And I suggested, well, I think I should just do this for nothing, right? Won't ask for any money. Tell him I will do this as a friend. And she said, okay. that sounds like a good idea. And I said, but there's something else you need to tell him. Tell him that I am expecting that he will pay for my transportation. Actually, she was going to airplane tickets and 2 hotel rooms. And she said, no, I'm not going to tell him that. And I said, you have to tell him that. She says, no, he knows that already. I said, no, he doesn't know that if we don't tell him. I said, in the United States, if it's not all in a contract, forget it. You can't count on anything. And she said, you said you were going to come as a friend. He knows that. Okay, he's going to take care of it. And we argued, must have been 30, 40 minutes, back and forth. Finally, I just gave up. I said, all right, you just do what you're going to do. So she did. I was not very happy with this. And 2 days later, his assistant called. And she said, why don't you tell us what flights you'd like to come on, and so I can buy the tickets. And she said, we got 2 very nice hotel rooms for you. Okay, so I would have lost it. And she said he would be offended. He knows that already. And I have, as I mentioned, I have a number of other friends whose Chinese is very, very good. But what they lack is the cultural understanding. And that was something that it required. My friend is my agent, but she actually hadn't been doing that work for very long, less than a year. But she just understood that not within her profession, but she understood it just as a Chinese person. A related factor to this is often Chinese people will not speak to a non-Chinese person the same way. Okay? They will say things to a Chinese person that they won't say to you because they don't particularly want to hurt your feelings. They're not trying to be rude by hiding something, but they're afraid they're going to hurt your feelings. But they might tell the Chinese person who then is responsible for communicating that to you. I have another friend who is in the airplane business, and he had been coming to China. He represents several small airplane manufacturers. And he had been coming to China for a number of years, trying to sell a couple of small plane manufacturers located in the United States. There's actually 3 companies that he represents. And he, on the one hand, he enjoyed being in China, but on the other hand, he had trouble with one particular thing. The thing that he had trouble with, was greatly bothered with, is the fact that he would go to meet with somebody, a business meeting, and they'd talk for a little while. And then the next step in that talking was, let's go have dinner. And then they go have dinner. And in the course of going and having dinner, they would be drinking. Now, Chinese people don't drink alcohol. They toast. They might drink a lot, but you don't just pick up a glass of alcohol and drink it, whether it's beer or wine or some kind of distilled liquor. You toast every single time you pick that up. And he was getting so frustrated. He says, I want to do business. I want to do business. I don't want to deal with dinner. Now, I think some people may have heard the concept of guanxi. And often this is put forward as a criticism of China. Now, what does it mean? It means basically you do business with friends. Now, that friend doesn't need to be an old friend. It might be a new friend. So the whole point of this dinner is that's the first step of doing business. Because many Chinese people are interested in doing business with friends. Now, you might not have been friends before, but we're going to start building that friendship right now. We talked a little business, told me what you're doing. Now we're going to go, we're going to eat, we're going to drink, we're going to get to know one another, and then we can talk business. Okay, so it's not, some people think it's a distraction. It takes away, they're not taking me seriously in terms of my business interests. But in fact, it's exactly the opposite. It's the prelude. This is how we develop the trust and the friendship and get to know one another. That concept, to a certain extent, exists everywhere, right? This guanxi concept. It often looks different. In the United States, for example, maybe it's through some kind of university association. So I come from Los Angeles. If you want to become an attorney in the entertainment field, the best place to go to law school is either the University of Southern California or the University of California, Los Angeles, right? Better than going to Harvard or Yale, because you're going to get a specialty in entertainment law. And the professors at the law school are probably the professors who taught the key executives within the various entertainment law firms, or the film industry or the recording industries in Los Angeles. So you apply for a job there, and what's going to happen, they're going to see you went to UCLA, and that's going to be a step up. So it's just another form of guanxi. We have it, Alfredo had mentioned it exists in Brazil. I'm sure it exists everywhere around the world. Something else, so at the university where I teach, anytime we have a new foreign faculty member come, particularly if they haven't lived in China before, I always make a point. It's a very unofficial, but I make a point of trying to meet them in advance before classes start. We'll meet for coffee or lunch. I'll show them around the campus and answer any questions that they have, as well as give them certain advice and suggestions. One of the things that I always tell them is expect the unexpected, because things change. Things often change quickly. So when I was either studying or as a student in a university in the United States, we had a schedule, a university schedule that was laid out a year for the entire academic year. We knew when there would be holidays. We knew if there was some special day for which that different activities would be held. We knew the days of the graduation ceremonies, okay? We had all of that laid out in detail, right? In China, well, we know a little bit of that, some of that, but it's not unexpected that somewhere in the course of this semester, we're going to be told, okay, next week, we're going to the vacation for this activity. All right, so let me give an example, an immediate example. The government had laid out that the holiday for the recent holiday, the October 31st National Day, which is the founding of the People's Republic of China, was October 1st to October 8th. All right, that was what the government authorized. Some places did that. Universities didn't. Some universities cut it to 2 days. Some cut it to 3. Mine cut it to 4. And we were notified of what days our holiday would be exactly 1 week before the holiday, which suddenly meant some of my classes weren't going to be meeting that week. I teach part-time at another university. The classes that were canceled, I had to make them up. So I had to then figure out another time. Years ago, in 2008, when the Olympics were held in Beijing, a very key role was played by volunteers for the Olympics. large number of whom were university students, both students studying in Beijing or students studying outside of Beijing. All right, the Olympics started in August. However, 1 month before class ended, all of the universities in Beijing were notified, we are going to be closing the school 2 weeks early. Why? Because a lot of the Beijing students were volunteers for the Olympics and they needed to get ready. And the other students who weren't, they needed to get them out of the dormitories because volunteers were coming from other universities and they had to have a place to put them. So we got 2 weeks notice to wrap up your teaching, get the exams done, whatever you got to do, and the semester is coming to an end. So these are just a couple of immediate examples, but it's a kind of thing if the graduation ceremonies frequently were notified of the actual date of graduations about a week in advance, various other kinds of things. And this is not merely in universities. I have a friend who works for the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the Institute of Astronomy. And he's an American from Tennessee, and he edits a Chinese language journal, astronomy journal there. He's a very interesting guy because he always said, you know, we worked out the plans for the week. I left on Friday, I come back in on Monday, and suddenly I find everything has changed. Now, his approach to this was, I really like it. It's kind of exciting. I never know what's going to happen. So it's something you have to be prepared for. And if you're prepared for that, then you can handle it. And if you're not prepared for that, it might cause problems. Another thing that frequently occurs is, let's say you're trying to get something done. I have a Chinese green card. I'm a permanent resident of the People's Republic of China. And I received the green card because I won this award that Alfredo had mentioned. It's called the Friendship Award. There have been about 2,000 people who have received that award in China. And what was occurring was the regulations for becoming a permanent resident. There are a lot of different categories, and they were going to be changing the categories and adding people like myself who had received this award to the categories of eligibility. And I kept checking with people from the government office that was responsible for this, who I knew. And I kept checking and saying, have they changed the regulations yet? Have they changed the regulations yet? Have they changed? And I kept getting told, no, you'll be notified, just be patient. And then finally, I was given a path to be able to speed up this process. I was told that this particular agency should write a letter on my behalf to another part of the Chinese government. And I spoke with people in this particular part of this agency, and they said, oh, no, we can't do that. And I said, no, you can. It's perfectly okay. And the response that I got, and people often get in situations like this is China. You just have to wait. This is China. And I don't get annoyed too often here, but that was something that annoyed me. And my response to the individual who told me that is, you know what? It's not China at all. It's called bureaucracy. And that bureaucracies are established to control reckless motion, to guide motion. I said, this exists all over the world. And at the same time, bureaucracies can move. And in fact, we got it to move because when they finally wrote the letter, it worked. But often what will occur is if someone doesn't want to do something, they'll say, this is China. and they'll blame it on China, when China is not the problem at all. The problem is the person. It's not, I don't think it's my job. I'm a little nervous about doing that. I've never done that before. I've never heard it being done before. I don't believe it can be done. And instead of being direct about it, they'll often blame the country. But the country is not really as stiff as they like to present it to be. Okay, one last point, and then we can talk about any questions that anybody has. There's a particular time of year that's sometimes difficult to get things done, and that starts in mid-December. Government offices, companies, all institutions all over the country have to submit annual reports at the end of the year. Okay, so in my university, every department is writing reports. Every administrative office is writing their annual reports. And it just goes up their chain of command. But this is not just there. It's government offices, state-owned enterprises, and each of the subordinates have to write their reports, and then they go up to their superiors, and then they have to put them together and write reports. So often that's a difficult time to get things done. And especially anything that requires people making decisions. If things are already set into motion. So I have a book that will be published during the end of December. All right, so that's a printing matter. But the contract is signed. The book has been edited. All of those aspects of work have been completed so that the mechanical steps of the physical labor of getting it printed will be possible to deal with. But if I had waited longer, I actually had signed the contract last year and it was signed in November. And I was told, don't wait until December to get it done. Then what happens is you get past the first of the year, and then pretty soon you're going to hit another obstacle. And that's called Spring Festival. Spring Festival is Chinese New Year, and it is a substantial holiday, right? And it lasts minimally 8 days, and depending upon the kind of institution or situation you're in, it might last longer. And literally nothing will happen during that time. Cities like Beijing empty out. Right? If a subway is normally crowded during the daytime, you can go on a subway and there are 5 people sitting in a car, right? In a subway car. It empties out. So there is this little window between the end of the year and people beginning, right, to get ready for Spring Festival. Because there's a lot of preparatory work. There's work, we're not going to be here for a week or two, and therefore we have to get all these other things done before Spring Festival. So that period, mid-December through Spring Festival is sometime between, it's based on the lunar calendar, and it's sometime between the end of January and the end of February. There's about a month fluctuation as to when it occurs based on the calendar. So those are particular times that are, you're not necessarily going to get things done. One of the things about Spring Festival, particularly in the big cities, when I first arrived, I arrived in Beijing 13 years ago. And at that point in time, there was nothing open. You know, there were a few convenience stores and a few small restaurants. And other than that, Beijing shut down. Now, it's not so much that way. That was how Christmas used to be when I was a kid, or Thanksgiving in the United States. But now, you know, it's become more like many Western countries at Christmas time, where you can go shopping, you can go to movies, all kinds of things. But offices are closed. Business offices are closed. retail outlets are open, entertainment things are open, restaurants are open, so on. I understand or I hope we have some questions or comments.
Well, oh, wonderful, wonderful, Mark. Thank you very much. I tell you, it is a great privilege, as I mentioned before, to have you as a cultural translator for us from a country that is still a bit far away for most of us. Now, you have also the privilege of teaching at a university that hosts the training for students that come from all over China.
Yeah.
And while the university and yourself are seated in Beijing, I wonder if you could tell us something about the possible differences that there may be in China, depending on the region where people go to.
Okay. So the specifics of the university, China has 56 ethnic groups. The largest are the Han, which represent 94% of the population. The other 55 make up the remaining 6% of the population. In some cases, there are millions. In some cases, there are tens of thousands. And for the most part, there are particular regions that specific ethnic groups come from. 10 of the ethnic groups in China are Muslims. There are differences, there are varieties of different languages. The standard language for China is Mandarin, but in southern China, people commonly speak Cantonese. But then there are lots of other languages. And the university that I teach at teaches very few foreign languages, but a lot of ethnic languages, Tibetan, Uyghur, Kazakh, Dai, and so on. And there are massive variations in terms of food, in terms of weather, in terms of holidays, cultural celebrations. So there are certain Chinese celebrations, but then there are other unique. So the Jiangsu, who live in Sichuan province, have their own spring festival. The Yizu, who are in Yunnan province and Sichuan province, also have their own spring festival, various other holidays and festivities that occur around the country at different points in time. But the language is more unified. Many of the students at my university do not, for them, Chinese is not their mother language. That's their second language, and English is their third language. Sometimes their fourth. Often because there are lots of regional dialects as well that are frequently hard for other Chinese people from other areas have trouble understanding. So somebody from southern Jiangsu province, the city of Suzhou, has trouble communicating with somebody from northern Jiangsu province because their dialects are completely different. So it's a widely diverse country. And generally, people from the minority cultures are very interested and eager to share their traditions and share their culture.
Good.
This is true.
Thank you, Mark. Let me make sure that the rest of the students are going to have some chance to speak. So if you have a question, could you please raise your hand like this so that I can tell who's coming? So it's Nathan Thompson, Nathan Morrison, and Julian, and later Gianna. Okay. So Mark, now you have an idea of how long to take to reply to each one of them. Julian was the first one to raise the hand, so go ahead, Julian.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for sharing your deep learning with us. I was also a teacher in China. I just came back from that experience. I did that for 2 years. I was also a paid and unpaid singer. I know how they like that. And I was just wondering what you could tell me, because you've been in China for over 10 years. What are the benefits? I know the benefits add up the more you stay in a country. What are some of the benefits that you've had in China because you've stayed so long, besides the friendship, a green card, and all of that?
Benefits. I know more people. I have more experience. I'm more comfortable in my life. I'm paid more because of the increased experience. And even in my as I walk around my neighborhood, even though as I mentioned, I don't speak Chinese, right? I'm known here. I'm part of the community, not just the university, but I'm part of the community. So I think that's, for me personally, that's the best benefit, is I'm not perceived. I'm a foreigner and I don't speak the language, but I'm not perceived as an outsider. I'm very much welcomed as an insider. So I think that's the number one benefit from my perspective.
Good, good, good.
And
Nathan Thompson,
where were
sorry?
you, and Julian, where were you?
I was in Shandong in Weifang.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right, next.
Yeah, kites.
Nathan Thompson, please.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for your time and your experience. I had noticed, and you just mentioned, so this reference isn't necessary, that you explicitly don't speak Chinese. And obviously, you have a lot of information and a lot of understanding of the way Chinese culture differs from American culture specifically. That's a perspective that we've gone over. But I'm wondering how you think that your lack of Chinese ability necessarily may have impacted, or it continues to impact your sort of cultural understanding, the way that you live in China.
Okay, it necessitates my establishing closer associations with Chinese people who do speak Chinese and do speak English. And I am not the kind of person who's capable of learning a language just by being around it. I would have to study it. I teach 28 hours a week. And I consider, and I'm 72 years old. And in terms of my making a contribution to China, which is why I came in the first place, I think I can make a better contribution to China by working with my students and teaching them how to communicate in the international language of English. And then those students then help me to understand more about their country.
Good. Thank you. Nathan Morrison.
Yeah, Mark, thank you so much for coming out. Obviously speaking to us, you have an incredibly, or I guess you have a unique experience with this stuff, especially with relation to a lot of the other speakers. My question for you though is, so you talked about like you wanting to go initially for like to contribute to China or to have a kind of positive effect on it, but what were some of the expectations that you had like before this jump to a totally new place, new culture, and how did that like change throughout that time, or initially at least?
Okay, I'm often asked about culture shock, and my response is I had none. I grew up in LA. I lived 24 years in San Francisco. I lived a cumulative total of 3 years in New York. So I've always been around people who spoke different languages, ate different food, celebrated different holidays. And China was different because there are more Chinese people. The real surprises in China were several. One, I was shocked at how many bakeries there are here. Two,
sorry, how many what?
Bakeries.
Bakeries for bread?
Panaderia, yeah. Okay, and second, I couldn't understand how come I would walk into the supermarket in December and all of the clerks in the market are wearing Santa Claus hats and there's Christmas carols playing in the store. These are the things that shocked me. All right. Apart from that, I'm not sure exactly what I expected, but I had one fear. My fear was a lot of my communication, I rely on humor, and I was terrified that people wouldn't laugh.
Yeah.
Right. And I can't stop my students from laughing when I go in and talk. All right. So I don't know. I think I was very surprised at how easy it was to form relations. Not that I expected it to be difficult. I just didn't know.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I definitely have a similar experience when it came to like the use or the fear of lack of translating humor and stuff like that in different places. So I can either empathize or sympathize, but I do appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Good. Gianna?
Hello, sir. Thank you very much for speaking with us. It was very fascinating, especially considering how unfamiliar I am with Chinese culture, and I think a lot of Westerners are. I was wondering.
Speak louder, please, Gianna.
Oh, sorry.
Speak louder.
Yeah. This closer. I was wondering, sir, as a sociologist in China for over a decade, I'm quite curious about how you perceive the social credit score system has changed the culture, if you think that's been substantially or subtly or at all.
I don't know how it's changed it. I think it's not directly related, but if we look at how Chinese people responded in relation to coronavirus, what we see is that for many people it wasn't necessarily comfortable. However, there is a greater collective understanding here. People, whereas in the US you've got people decrying the necessity to wear a mask because we're taking away their freedom. Right? In China, it was, well, if I'm healthy, maybe somebody else will get sick. And there's more of a collective responsibility. So I'm not sure that how much that is affected, the social credit system has affected anything. Because I think even from the very first time I came, there's much more of an orientation towards responsibility, not merely for yourself, but to others as well. And I think that's where the social credit system fits in.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Any more questions from the students? This bright lot, Clarky, please.
So I think my question should be simple enough. How do you think, like, growing so close to like China, how do you think that affected your relationship in dealing with people from the West, like specifically the United States, as like tensions grow and you become like this awarded individual in China? Has that kind of strained your political relationship to the United States?
Last time I was in the United States was in 2011. All right, and February of 2011, I haven't been back since. The last time I was there, I had a very interesting experience. I was in LA and Denver and San Francisco. I saw family, I saw friends of my parents who I hadn't seen in 25 years. I saw people I was in college with. I talked to people I was in high school with who I hadn't communicated with in 40 years. And I was amazed because nobody said, "When are you coming back?" The response that I got was, "What a smart decision you made." Or, "My wife and I are trying to figure out where we can move to." Or, "I bet you can't wait to get back home to Beijing." Not a single person said, "When are you coming back?" So in terms of anybody I'm in contact with, no, not at all. Not at all. And I communicate with people through email, but particularly I have a lot of contacts through WeChat. And that's always the response that I get. I have friends. I was just talking to a woman who's a professor at Cal State Los Angeles, but she's also a distinguished professor in Hunan province. And she's saying, "You're so lucky to be there. I wish I could get back." But personally, I don't think it's had that kind of effect on me. I have a colleague of mine, young colleague of mine, who had lunch with him yesterday, and he was saying, "I talked to my parents yesterday. They told me they're voting for Trump." And so for some people, that may be the case. Hasn't been my problem. Okay?
Thank you.
Yep.
Mark, tell me, after your long experience in China I mean, it surely must have changed you in some way, but what would you say is the way of building trust between people in China?
Between a foreigner and being in China?
Yes.
Okay, one of the things that happens is I write music about China. And although I don't speak Chinese, I sing an awful lot of Chinese songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked hard to sing them very well. But I don't try to pretend to sing them like I'm a Chinese singer. Okay, so the fact that I'm trying, the fact that I'm doing something that obviously is difficult, right? People appreciate that. When I started singing here, I didn't start singing Chinese songs. That came along later. And it's a tremendous amount of work for me to learn how to do that. And people appreciate that. They see that. Beyond that, you know, I've been in situations where I was out in talking at a high school, an rural high school about 14 years ago. And one of my students, her uncle ran the high school. And after I spoke to a couple of auditoriums full of students, one of the teacher's sons was celebrating his birthday, and they were having a small lunch at a restaurant, and they invited me to come. And as we're walking through this village, many people are standing outside their house, staring. And then I turned around and I saw about 100 people following us. And I turned around and I put a smile on my face. And I said, "Ni hao." And suddenly people responded, "Ni hao." They were curious, right? It was not 100 people threatening me. They were curious. They had probably never seen a non-Chinese person before, right? And I could smile and I greeted them in their language and they responded in kind. I got the smile back, all right? So people who, you've got to, part of what needs to happen is you need to allow China to speak for itself. And one of the difficulties, many people who come with a lot of preconceived notions about China or biases or prejudices that's carried in a lot of non-Chinese media. And if that's how we perceive things, then we will see things through that perspective. And if we come and say, okay, I've heard things, but I don't know, I have to find out for myself, then we will get a completely different response and a completely different perception of what's here. I would expect Julianne could confirm that.
Brilliant, Mark, brilliant. Thank you very, very much. We have to wind it up now, but you know, it's been a very helpful talk. And I'm really thrilled by your presence here, and particularly thankful because it's so late for you. And I hope that we will soon be able to toast in person with you in Beijing sometime, whether it's in December or March, just to make sure that we are getting hold of you. Okay. Listen, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
I will now suspend the recording, take 10 minutes of rest for you, and we meet again soon.
All right.
Thank you, Mark.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sleep well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.